Okay, good morning everybody. This is my experimental video for Law Comer, who was wondering what's the difference between cast iron and non-stick cookware. So what I've got here is a KitchenAid cast iron pan, nicely seasoned. I've been using it for a couple of years now. And a brand new non-stick pan that Sylvia has owned for years but doesn't use because she doesn't like the size of it. It's a weird, she doesn't cook in non-stick anyway, but it's a weird shaped pan because it's smaller on the bottom and bigger on the top. It's almost like halfway between a pan and a wok. They're heated to the same temperature, 5 on my stove. They're equal, front and back burner. And I figured I would start off the experiment with a piece of bacon. So you can see how bacon fries in cast iron versus how bacon fries in non-stick. People use non-stick and cast iron for different reasons. They both have advantages. Well, I don't actually see that non-stick has any advantages, but I guess if you want to cook without any fat at all, like if you're on an extremely no-fat diet, which is sort of like a no-taste diet, you can put food in the non-stick frying pan without having to put butter or olive oil or any other kind of fat in the pan. Actually, what I'm going to do for today's experiment is I'm just going to use the bacon fat that comes off of the bacon. So right away, if you look at what's going on in the cast iron frying pan, the bacon is sizzling pretty nice and getting crispy, nicely crispy, which is what cast iron does. It actually fries, whereas if you look at the non-stick, it kind of more boils in its own liquid. Fat will come out of the bacon, but it doesn't get, look at the difference in the crispiness of the frying pan bacon, because it's actually frying, I'm sorry, the cast iron pan bacon, it's actually frying, versus over here in the non-stick where it's kind of boiling. And that's my main complaint about non-stick, is if I wanted boiled food, I'd boil food. Food doesn't actually seem to fry in a non-stick pan. So all this sort of golden, caramelizing sweetness and crispiness that you get in the cast iron frying pan, you don't get it here. Okay. I'll let it set for another minute, sort of simmering in its own liquid there. And I think probably I'll move it over here in a moment to finish it properly. Because no matter how long I cook this will never look like that. Okay? Let's move that one over. Take that one out of the non-stick. There's the non-stick shot. It's kind of pale and gross looking. So we'll take it out of the non-stick and put it in the cast iron. Crisp it up a little bit. So now you can see it's actually frying. They'll turn golden brown quite quickly. I'm going to leave the pans at the exact same temperature, and in fairness, I won't take the fat out of the non-stick pan. I'll just leave it as it was with the bacon cooking. Okay, look at that, eh? Woo! That's golden brown. That will never happen in there, ever. Okay. So let that cook for just one more second. Forrest is very anxious to make sure he's going to get the experimental food. Okay. So there you go. That's a golden brown piece of bacon. Now I'm going to just leave the fat in the pan, and I'll put in each pan a potato. Okay. Actually, I might even turn the heat up under here just to give it a fighting chance, but I doubt it. Of course, a fried potato needs the tiniest bit of salt. Okay. So we're going to leave them go now. That won't take very long. Okay. Now, some of the other questions that Law was asking about the cookware, why is cast iron different than the non-stick that he cooks in? Another key, well, besides durability, and I'll talk about that in a second, but another key feature of cast iron that you won't find in non-stick is that I can take this, when I'm done, and stick it in the oven, with or without a lid, with or without foil over top of it. The cast iron, as long as it's all cast iron without a wooden handle, will go right from the stove top to the oven. Turn that one down a bit, actually. from the stovetop to the oven. I make a chicken recipe where you cut the spine out and you flatten the chicken, and then you sear it on both sides. I use a bigger frying pan. And then add a bunch of vegetables, potatoes, carrots, some dressing, olive oil dressing or whatever, and or white wine, and stick it in the oven. And when you come back, you have like this fantastic cast iron cooked chicken dinner. You don't have to change pans. You don't need extra pans. You don't need anything extra. You just take your cast iron and stick it into the oven. So cast iron can go from the stovetop to the oven. Let me just take a little peek under there. It's a second longer. Can go from the stovetop to the oven, whereas non-stick like that, I would not put that in the oven. I'm not even sure if it's healthy or advisable to put non-stick in the oven. I'd have to check that out for you, but most of the non-stick I've seen has a plastic handle anyway, so you wouldn't be doing that. So from a convenience point of view, it is really fun to be able to get everything ready. There you go, we're getting nice. I could actually let that go a little bit longer, but that's good. Okay, so now let's flip that one. Whoa, anemic. Okay, it's trying to cook. They're already pre-boiled, but you can see the golden brown of the cast iron frying pan compared to this one over here that is literally just getting warm. Like it's in the bacon fat as the same as this one is, but it's not frying. It's, let's see if we can try to give it a fighting chance there. Very pale, very anemic, very non-crispy. And as Tommy would say, that makes it non-delicious. It's not going to be delicious enough. So we'll leave those go for about 10 more seconds, and then I'm going to do kind of the big kahuna test, which is an egg. Get an egg out of here. So I can guarantee you this one is going to have a nice crispy edge on it. When you bite into it, you'll feel the crunch. The outside will be encrusted, it'll be crispy, and the inside will be tender, and certainly it'll be beautifully hot and heated all the way through. This one is going to taste like a warmed up potato. It's literally not fried. Like what goes on in a non-stick pan isn't frying. More often it's a kind of a boiling or a simmering, but it's not you would never be able to make French fries in a non-stick pan because stuff doesn't fry. Okay, so let's just say that this one's done. I'll just flip it over so you can see that side. If I wasn't trying, that's actually a pretty good side. If I wasn't trying to make a video for law, I would probably cook those a little longer. Okay, so now we'll just give this one a second or two in the cast iron, see if we can bring it up to our standards. So, convenience, you can take your pans from the top of the stove into the oven. And then second would come durability. This frying pan here, the cast iron one, I expect it to last 100 years. My friend Benoit Violette, who enlightened me into French culture and cast iron cooking, points out that French people from New Brunswick, which is a maple sugar area too, have no problem spending money on cast iron because they fully expect it to last 100 years. The people who run the sugar shacks on the sugar farms, there you go, now we're finally getting a little bit golden brown there. The people who run the maple sugaring operations buy massive, like witch's brew size cast iron pots, which is what they boil the syrup in, the sap in to make syrup. And the cost of the pan is amortized basically over 2 or 3 generations, whereas this pan back here will be good for a couple of years of regular use, and then you need to replace them. They start to get scratched. They start to become much less non-stick. They're not non-stick anymore, so then you have to add fat to the pan in order to just be able to use it. Okay, so I'll give this one over here a fighting chance to put the egg in first. Let's see if it... Okay, so that's pretty white looking. Let's try this one. So if you spend $25 on a non-stick pan or $25 on a cast iron pan, which is what this KitchenAid pan costs at Canadian Tire, $25. This one, Johanna's kids will be using it. This one will be toast by 2015. And that's one gross looking egg. Okay, give this one a flip. Okay. Now, this one has to be flipped with plastic, so we get that. Okay, that one doesn't actually look too bad. The bacon fat is helping. Okay. Seconds, that'll be done. That's a perfect fried egg. Look at that, it's still frying and it's got yolk to spare. And then this one here, oh, it's actually not quite cooked. It's still kind of raw. Oh, it's kind of bumpy raw. Wait, I'm putting that one back. Oh, gross. Okay, I'm putting that one back in the pan. Hold on, just one sec. Okay, just actually cooked for me. Okay. This has nothing to do with the temperature. This is actually at a higher temperature than this one. Turn that off. It's just the way the food, the outside of the food actually hits the cast iron and the fat in the cast iron and sears itself. So while the outside is, oh wait, plastic. While the outside is turning golden brown, the inside is basically steaming itself. Which is why properly fried food should not be greasy, because only the outside sears when it hits the metal. Oops, I used metal in my Sylvia's nonstick pan. She'll never forgive me. Okay, so at the end of the day, not too much yolk left in that one. I should have probably left the food without putting it in the cast iron, but I couldn't stand to waste it. So what comes out of a cast iron pan is crispy golden, has a nice texture, is flavorful. The cast iron can go from the stovetop to the oven and it will last for 100 years or more. The non-stick, the food kind of boils rather than fries. Truly, if you know the difference between sauteing, steaming, poaching, this is a more a liquid based. It's the liquid that comes out of the food that cooks it. And this one is more the heat of the metal and the fat sears the food and it steams itself from the inside. So it's more flavorful, it's crispier. It's more durable, and it can go from the stovetop to the oven. If you make a mistake and cook something in nonstick and the food sticks to the pan, which can happen, and you end up having to scrub it or clean it in any way, you will be wrecking the finish and just shortening the life of the pan immeasurably. This guy, the cast iron one, if something sticks to it, you can scrub it. I try not to use, you can scrub it. You can even put oven cleaner on it, which if I've really messed up, like the time when I left 10 pounds of chicken wings in my cast iron Dutch oven, and they absolutely just crusted to the inside of the pan. I actually had to chisel the bones and the chicken out. I sprayed it with oven cleaner and started seasoning it all over again, and it's, you know, back in service the next day. You keep seasoning it. Seasoning cast iron means that you warm the pan with oil, which, as you can see from having cooked the bacon, the potato, and the egg, happens every time you use cast iron. So this pan is now more non-stick than it was when I started this process, and as long as I don't abuse it, it will become more non-stick every time I use it. Till it gets a beautiful patina like wood does, and you never want to remove that patina if you can help it. So every time you use cast iron, it becomes more nonstick. Every time you use nonstick, it becomes less nonstick. So this one's getting better with age, this one's getting weaker. And then the final point that I would make, which I don't want to provoke any lawsuits or anything, but the chemicals that are used in nonstick do migrate to the food. They are not good chemicals for you. When I was working on the chemicals management plan for Health Canada, the chemicals used in non-stick coating, no brand names required, are actually deemed toxic, inherently toxic. The argument that the manufacturers had was that they can reduce the amount of chemical that migrates into food and is released in manufacturing, and by reducing the amount released, they were able to avoid a toxic label. So that they never argued that the stuff wasn't toxic. What they argued was it wouldn't be released. So if that makes you happy, if you're comfortable with that kind of speaking, yeah, it's toxic, but no, none of it will get in your system. then, you know, nonstick is the way to go. I don't like it. I don't trust it. I wouldn't use it for my family. And what is released from iron is actually iron. So if you're anemic, you would rather be cooking in cast iron. So that'll be the end of the video. Perhaps as the day goes on, I might add another segment or two. But essentially, you can don't just take my word for it. You can see the food as it cooks. That's the major difference between cast iron and nonstick. And I highly encourage everyone to invest in a tiny bit of cast iron, maybe a frying pan in a Dutch oven, and start off cooking and see if you don't notice a major difference in the flavor and texture of your food. And it is really nice not to have to go out and buy a new frying pan every other year, but to have one that gets better every year and which you can leave to your kids. So there you go, Law. That's the difference between cast iron and nonstick. Rita Smith, signing off.